You're listening to Make It, a podcast by Bonsai Creative that helps aspiring professionals in film get where they're going faster by dissecting the advice, knowledge, and insights of professional creatives in the film industry. I'm your host, Chris Barkley.
Hello, my name is Josh Bishop. I am a documentary filmmaker. You may know me from my films Made in Japan and The Dwarvenaut. Currently, I'm working on a music video for Easy Eye Sound, Dan Auerbach's music label, and a TV pilot.
Josh Bishop, welcome to the Make It podcast.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Anytime. Truly excited to have you on. So much to dig into around your life in the creative arts and in film and beyond. To give the audience a deeper sense of who you are, I'm going to read a little bit from your bio. And as I always say, this is the internet. So when I get done, feel free to jump in and say A, B, C, or D was inaccurate or that was spot on. Josh Bishop is an award-winning director specializing in feature documentaries, branded content, and music videos. Josh's first documentary feature, Made in Japan, currently streaming on Amazon Prime, premiered at South by Southwest in 2015 in Austin, Texas. The film boasts Morgan Spurlock as executive producer and Elijah Wood as both executive producer and narrator. His second documentary feature, The Dwarvenaut, premiered at South by Southwest in 2016 and is currently available on most VOD platforms after almost 3 years on Netflix. After almost 2 decades of life in New York City, Josh relocated to Nashville with his family in 2018, where he continues to create documentaries, branded content, and music videos. While staying safe from the pandemic, Josh and his wife, Keturah, teamed up to officially form A Window in a Tunnel. Josh's most recent work includes multiple music videos for Dan Auerbach's Easy Eye Sound recording label and an array of videos for an exciting selection of emerging Nashville talent. That sounds like a lot of stuff going on and a lot of awesomeness. Does that sound about right, Josh?
Yeah, that sounds about right. That definitely does sum up who I am and what I have going on.
So much to dig into there. But first, I want to start with something that might actually go nowhere, which is, why do they call you the Bish, and who started calling you that and why?
That's hilarious. That actually makes me smile. So I have back in New York, an old friend who passed away. His name was Jim Starachi, and he was a real deal old school New Yorker from Queens. And he was like an animator. He was a stop motion animator, but he also fronted this band, Puny Human, which was like a stoner rock band. But he'd been around for a long time, and I was brought into contact with him to work on a film together. We made a stop motion animated film together, and everyone that knew him got a nickname. So he used to call me the Bish. And we have a pretty big group of friends in New York. Like, a lot of people knew him and loved him very much. And that's so funny that you're asking me about that, man, because he's like one of these people that like he died and everyone just broke everyone's heart. But I hear his voice a lot, you know, because I learned a lot from that guy. He was quite a bit older than me. I knew him in my 20s mostly. And at the time, I don't think I understood like how much of an artist he truly was. I was really just kind of dead set on working on my own film with him. And it wasn't until he died. I mean, I truly love the man, but it wasn't until he died that I really kind of started to understand like the gift that he had given me by working with me, and how much I learned from him, you know? So by you asking me that, I can't help but think that he's like saying hi, you know?
Oh, that's beautiful. That's beautiful. I love that. And it is funny because when you lose someone, and then, you know, anyone that loses someone young, for example, it stays with you for life. And it's funny how those people sort of reach down from the heavens and remind you that they were there in your life from time to time like this. So I love that. Happens to me all the time. So I'm glad I could be the messenger for his reach down from the heavens to you right now.
Well, thank you, man. And I say that, like, I believe that stuff, you know. I mean, I'm not by any means a religious person, but I'm definitely I have certain spiritual beliefs, and I think you know, I feel creative energy around me from other sources quite often, you know, and definitely from Jim. His name's Jim Starachi. He was in another band called Norman Bates and the Showerheads, which any punk rocker from Queens from the 80s knows. The 80s and 90s will know Norman Bates and the Showerheads. He was Jim Starachi literally auditioned for the Ramones when they were looking for like, I think, I don't know who it was that was no longer there, but they needed a bass player, and Jim auditioned. And it was funny. He told me the story went like this. The guy he calls up to make the appointment, and someone answers. It's not one of the Ramones, it's their manager or something like that. And he goes, "Yeah, so what's your name?" And then Jim goes, "Jim." And then he heard Marky Ramone off to the side go, "Huh, Jimmy Ramone. Yeah, that could work." And he said he went and auditioned for the Ramones, and he said it went really well, but the gig ended up going to someone else. But it was like he was like that kind of guy. He had those kinds of New York, like old school New York punk rock stories, you know. He was as authentic as it could. They just, those kinds of people aren't really around anymore, you know. So that's why it was such a gift to know that guy, you know. Yeah,
for all the accolades a person can have in their life, the ones we remember are the people who touch us with their great stories and experiences that they were brave enough to embark upon. Right? Yeah. They can bring us, and that's a nice segue into the next thing I want to ask you, because you've lived your life by a credo, if you will, which is films are like windows that give us a glance outside of the tunnel of life. And I think about the window in that tunnel that you talk about when you tell me a story like that about Jim Starachi, where he's living this experience and he's giving you a little bit of a window so you can look at the movie that was his life, where he was the ultimate protagonist. And looking back and thinking about when you sort of had this epiphany about the window in the tunnel, can you break this down a little bit for us? And what was your frame of heart and mind when this came to you? And
I remember.
And can you break it down a little bit for us?
Yeah, man. I remember exactly where I was. When I was 22, I moved to New York City from Belgium. Like, I'm American, but I grew up in Europe. And I came back to the United States with the goal of making films. And I knew that I kind of did not want to work within the Hollywood system, and that I definitely was more aligned with the independent, artists, film for art as opposed to film for commerce. Mm-hmm. And I kind of always had that like alternative mind. And I remembered that Spielberg is very different, with very different sensibilities than myself. And don't worry, I'm not comparing myself to Steven Spielberg. I'm just saying he had created his own little film entity when he was a kid called Amblin. And I just remember thinking like, well, I should create my own entity for the work that I'm going to do. And it just, I don't know how that saying came to me, a window in a tunnel. but it did. And then I kind of have always, from that point on, I've always used that as my entity, even before, like now I actually have an official production company together with my wife, but Window in a Tunnel has always been like my Amblin entertainment. It's been the thing that I came up with it when I was, I'm 40, I'll be 42 in August. I came up with that name 20 years ago, like when I was 22 years old, and it just stuck. And yeah, like I have these memories of, unfortunately, it doesn't happen as often anymore, but just seeing a film and being in such like complete and total awe, like a powerful one, if you saw the right one, a powerful film, and like not like just how did that happen? Like how did this person, this where did this vision come from? And it was like being able to look through a window into outside of my own thing, and just like for that hour and a half being given a glance at some stroke of genius, you know what I mean? And I guess that's kind of like what where that came from. Again, I'm not trying to say that the things that I do, I don't consider myself a genius by any means, but just the ability to look outside of your own kind of little thing and into something else is, I guess, what A Window in a Tunnel kind of has always meant for me, You
mentioned you knew you didn't want to work in the Hollywood system. That's a pretty bold thing to know at the age of 22. Most filmmakers at 22, that's all they're trying to do. So was there something that happened, something that hit you, some experience you had, something you witnessed that turned you off from Hollywood young?
Yes. That's funny. That's funny. Well, first of all, let me say this. First of all, I have always been, from the time I was a kid, like I started listening to punk rock and kind of alternative. I kind of had alternative sensibilities from a very young age. So I've always been very much kind of attracted to the anti-establishment thing. Mm-hmm. But when I was 19, I have a cousin, Chris, who is a stunt guy. He doesn't do stunts anymore, but he was a stunt guy, and he worked on a lot of major Hollywood blockbusters. And my mom had heard from him, he had heard from my mom that I was looking to get into film. So he invited me out to LA to work with him for a summer. And this was like in 99. And he was working on Pearl Harbor, that Michael Bay movie. Mm-hmm. And I worked with him I just did like 2 days on that with him. And the film hadn't even been cast yet. It was literally Michael Bay was shooting stunt tests out on Long Beach, and it was nothing but stunts. And it was like incredible. But that summer I hung out with my cousin and all of his stunt buddies, and I'm very grateful that I had those experiences. But I just knew, like, that kind of cutthroat. It just seemed to me that those movies were not. I was not wanting to get into the film business to make. I wanted to get into the film business to make a living, but I didn't want to get into the film business to make Michael Bay movies. I wanted to get into the film business to make my work, my stuff, to learn how to get that done. And I think I was young and stupid enough to when I finally did, I just dove straight in, and I was like, it's come hell or high water, that's what's going to happen,
Yeah, absolutely.
I have been able to in my life maintain. I've never had another job. Like, I've always worked in the film business from my entire adult life. And when I look back at things now, I'm like, I don't know how the hell I pulled this off, but somehow I have. Knock on wood,
Yeah, you're living the ideal life according to creatives. The many people know this if they've been listening to this podcast since day one, but for you, you may not know, but this podcast got started by me going around and my partner, Nick, going around and asking people in the creative film world, hey, what does it mean to make it? What does it mean to make? We just had a handheld recorder, Josh, at the time. So what does it mean to make it? What does it mean to you to make it? And people would say almost every time, well, I just want to pay my bills doing art. And I just want to pay my bills doing art. And we could be cynical about it and say, well, we don't believe you. We think you're giving us the answer you're supposed to give us, and really you want to be rich and famous and all that stuff. And I think to some people we've seen that's definitely the case. They don't just want to pay their bills doing their art. They want so much more, and that's fine. No judgment. But what you just described is what everyone says they want, Josh.
Yeah, it's I don't know. It's like it's a blessing and a curse, because I knew from the time, I always, I play guitar too. And when I was a kid, it was like, I'm going to be a rock and roll guitar player. And I that was just going to happen. That's just the thing that I was going to do. Like I couldn't actually see anything else happening for me. And then I saw Down by Law, Jim Jarmusch's Down by Law, and everything kind of saw that movie, and I was like, wow, man, that was rock and roll. And I was 16, and I was that kid that was always picking apart the movie.
Yeah.
and always like you'd be with friends and they were enjoying the film, but I was always, yeah, but didn't you see that mistake, or didn't you I would have totally done it this way. And I'd always kind of had thoughts about what it would be like to make films, but I didn't know about this other way. I just thought that filmmaking meant millions and millions and millions of dollars and Hollywood. And it was either that or, at that age, it was like either that or really boring French movies, which no one wanted to watch. Like that was my perception of films.
Right.
And I didn't know that there was this, but there's also this other thing going on where it's all, the people are almost like auteurs. It's like, and when I became aware of movies like Down by Law and David Lynch stuff and Herzog and then I did later on kind of start to understand the French New Wave, and then I got into all these Japanese movies, and I just became obsessed. And so I guess when I was like 16 or 17, I decided like this is what I'm going to do. And there's no one that can tell me otherwise. And I left Europe. I came back to the States, and I just started, man.
Right, because
earlier,
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I started PAing on commercials. I literally just started doing anything that I could. I mean, I did have a little bit of PA experience. After I worked with my cousin in LA that year, I flew back to Belgium, and I lived in Belgium for like another 2 years, and I got into their film industry, and I worked there for a little bit. And then I just decided it was time to come back to the United States. I'd been gone for almost 11 years, and I knew I didn't want to go to LA. And so I went to New York, and I just dove straight in,
Yeah, I love that. And so you were around, because you mentioned growing up, being American, but growing up in Europe, and, I believe you speak Dutch and French and Japanese fluently.
Well, I don't speak Japanese fluently. I do speak quite a bit of Japanese, but I speak Dutch fluently. Yeah. Got it.
What
I do speak some Japanese though.
Yeah, and then French. You speak French as well?
I have like I can kind of get by in French, because if you grow up in Belgium, you have to. You're expected to. It's mandatory at school. You know what I mean? And I gotta say, if I would have stayed for like another year, I probably would have become fluent, because I was like I said, I was working in the film business there, and the film business there is bilingual. So
got it.
I would end up on film sets where like no one spoke Dutch, and I would have to speak French. But I was at the point to where I probably, if I would have stayed for another year, my French would have gotten a lot better. But to answer your question, I can read and write a lot of French. I can hold my own in a conversation, but by no means am I fluent.
Got it. Got it. But it's a unique triad of languages. All the same. First thing I thought was, I wonder if he's ever written a song in Japanese before.
No.
But I thought of that right after I watched Made in Japan, which we're going to talk about here in a little bit. You did move around. I think the audience would kill me if I didn't ask why you moved around Europe so much.
So when I was a kid, my mom married a man from Holland, and so they got married, and then we moved to Rotterdam, and that didn't last. And my mom is a pianist by trade, and she got a playing job at the Antwerp Hilton in Belgium, and we moved to Belgium, and she didn't. We had gotten citizenship, like at the time, like a green card or whatever. I don't know what their version of a green card is, but we were allowed to stay there. And I lived in Holland from 91 until the very end of 93, and then it might have actually already been 94. And then I lived in Belgium from 94 until the very end of 2001.
Got it.
So my teenage years, were really spent in Europe.
You were 15 when you began studying audiovisual communications technology. Sounds like the moment happened for you in film a little bit after that, around 16 or 17.
I was older than that. I went to an art high school in Belgium. In Europe, they do this thing where they specialize in high school.
Okay, that's interesting.
It's much more like it's much more specialized over there at a younger age. And I was a total fuck up in school, and then my mom got me into this art she was like, well, what if you went to this art school? So when I was 16, I went to this art school, and then I had to do at first I was doing like sculpting and painting and that kind of thing, sketching. I was heavy on just straight up art. And then the last 2 years of that school, you could choose an audiovisual program or photography. And so it just clicked. Like I saw, like I said, I saw those movies, and I was like, man, I don't know what it is, but I want to do that program, And so I kind of had. It's almost like it was almost like the equivalent of like an associate's degree when I got done with that school, because I had. Mind you, I also failed a year, so I got 3 years of that education. So it was, and I didn't fail any of my film stuff. I failed it's a very strict system over there, and I think I screwed up on my math exam, and they literally made me redo the entire year. Which I was super angry about at the time. But now that I think about it, it was actually a blessing, because it gave me another year to kind of practice filmmaking,
That's right. And you did work in film in Belgium a little bit.
Yeah.
And I'm curious if you could share with the audience how it is and what might be some differences that stand out to you between the European film industry and the film industry in the United States.
Well, the biggest difference is that European films are not films for commerce. They are mostly funded by that country's film fund. So that's taxpayer dollars that are going there. Belgium, at the time, I'm not current because I've been gone for a long, long time. At the time, they were only making like 5 features a year, and they were, features. To get a film funded by the film funds, it still has to go through a rigorous process of there's people who choose who gets the money and who doesn't, you know what I mean?
So some gatekeepers.
Yeah, there's a lot of gatekeepers. And so first of all, there's that. So you're never working on a film that has more than like $5 million or $10 million, because they simply they don't have. There ain't no Belgian getting $250 million to make a movie. You know what I mean? Like they just don't do that because they're not made to make money. They're literally just made for the art, you know? And the art, a lot of the arts are funded like that over there. Mm-hmm. There's that. And then, the system, the actual, the on-set hierarchy is different. In the American system, the first assistant director is not trying to ever be a director. That guy, probably will stay in AD and maybe eventually start producing. Whereas in Europe, in the European system, the assistant director wants to be a director and will become a director eventually. Mm-hmm. Things work a little differently. You know what I noticed, like in Belgium and in Holland, the grips cut the lights. Like an electric will definitely place the lights and is in charge of electricity and stuff like that, but he's not in charge of like putting scrims or putting anything in front of the lights. That was all grip work. And there was like the one that always stands out to me is there's a camera grip where like it's a grip's job. Like he's literally a camera grip. It's the grip's job to move the camera. And that grip, that guy knows how to take that camera apart, put it back together, load, film, everything. But he doesn't ever do that unless, for some reason, the loader is sick or something like that. But in the United States, in the American system, if anyone touches the camera besides a camera assistant, like, that guy would get assassinated. So I guess there's just things. There's things about just technical things, that are different in the European system than they are here.
Which do you prefer?
I think my independent spirit kind of prefers. I don't know if I necessarily prefer the American system or the European system more. I mean, I know that my style itself probably lends itself more to the European system, and just I'm not trying to make Hollywood blockbuster movies,
Right.
But there is something to be said for if you get on a real deal union American movie set, that is a well-oiled machine, and those are technicians and craftspeople that come from families, generations of craft, and it's so professional. They're so good at what they do that it's just second nature, and some of the most talented craftspeople in the world, and their jobs are really kind of unsung because no one really knows what they do except for people inside the movie business. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely.
But a good focus puller, a good first assistant camera person, what that guy does is it's insane. Like the level of craft and attention to detail and the nerves of steel that those guys have to have, to be able to pulling focus at a shallow depth of field while some guy is like charging straight at the camera. You know what I mean? Like it's those things are those are insider bits of knowledge that the real world, that people outside the film business can't really appreciate because they literally have no idea what's going on there. But
yeah,
I would say that American craftspeople are probably higher skilled just in that there's more money behind it. The union system has, those are families of third and fifth generation guys that are doing that. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
So I would just say that because there's more money in the American system, the level of professionalism and just well-oiled machine is higher here. But that by no means does that mean that the movies are better. It just means that the craft itself is more, for me anyway, is more honed in and more tried and true. If that makes any sense.
Oh, it definitely does. Like I remember watching. It was 1917, a couple of years ago, a year or two ago. I can't remember exactly when that movie came out, but to Deacon's movie, right? And the shot at the end where the protagonist is, because I'm forgetting the character's name and the actor's name, but where he's running across the field to deliver the message, and the battle is going on all around him. And then that camera shot. And then when he jumps into the ditch to safety, and how the camera moves with him, and, you know, to find out that wasn't on any kind of, that wasn't a robot doing that. I geeked out about that. And the people around me that were watching it with me weren't film people, and they were like, okay, big deal. I'm like, no. No, that is maybe the best shot I've ever seen. That was incredible. That should win. That shot alone won all the awards for me. So I'm definitely with you. Let's dig in. Go ahead.
Let me just book in that real fast.
Yeah, please.
And move on. I definitely don't mean to say that. I mean, some of my favorite DPs in the world are Europeans. Some of my favorite filmmakers in the world are Europeans. I literally just mean the hierarchical professionality of the way that the American system is set up is simply because it has so much more money, is able to be that much more of a machine. Does that make sense?
It's absolute truth. Yeah, it's absolute truth. Yeah, I'm with you for sure, because I believe we were talking about this early last year about how many films were coming out of the UK that were just as you described, like these $1 to $5 million sort of taxpayer BBC funded films that were great, but they couldn't sell them. Like the market had dried up on them. This is actually right before the pandemic. I'm sure they sold as soon as the pandemic hit because people needed stuff to watch. But there was a crisis going on in indie film in Europe because you had all these taxpayer funded $5 million, $3 million indie films that couldn't find a market anymore because of the way that the Netflixification, I'll just create a word, of the distribution side of film, where, hey, we want to compete with Netflix, let's make our own things, let's be insular, and we're not going to scour the market for films as much anymore. But I think the pandemic actually switched that. It was kind of a boon period for indie creatives and smaller creatives all the way around. It was very interesting how it all went down. Speaking of independent film, you made a touching documentary. I really enjoyed it. Made in Japan. And this follows the story of the first Japanese woman to play at the Grand Ole Opry.
Yeah.
So Tomi Fujiyama.
That's right. Yeah.
And I want to know how you found out that this person existed. How did you know Tomi existed? And why did it take 11 years to make this documentary?
Okay. Well, so at the time I was married to a Japanese woman, no longer married to that person, but I was young, and I knew I was 24 when I started making Made in Japan. And at that point in my career, I knew that I had to make a feature. All of my favorite guys, everyone that I knew, like no one, at that time, you're young. It's like, oh, I should make a bunch of short movies, and then I can make a really good short movie. And then that short movie, maybe I can use that as a calling card to fund my feature. Mm-hmm. And that was the thought. And I was like, I early on figured out, that ain't happening. Like, no, like you can make the best short film in the world. That doesn't mean no one is giving you money. Like literally no one is giving you money. So I just kind of early on figured out, like, I got to make a feature, like come hell or high water. And I wasn't setting out to be a documentarian. I wasn't setting out to make documentary. So I fast forward, I'm kind of just married this Japanese woman, and we went to, she was a jazz singer. My ex-wife was a jazz singer. And she took me back to Japan, and she's like, I know this lady that you got to meet. She was the first Japanese person to play on the Grand Ole Opry. She's a country singer. And she used to take voice lessons from Tomi. My ex-wife used to take voice lessons from Tomi Fujiyama.
Got it.
And so I went to a gig in Yokohama, and I just see this tiny little, she's like 4'10", literally. Like she's like this tiny little woman, killing it, just absolutely killing it. And I kind of, at first, and it was also, I think, the age that I was. At first, it was like, I totally want to go see this. I want to go see the really weird thing. Yes, let's go watch a Japanese person play country music. and then I quickly realized that the woman was authentic, was real, and that this was a very she knew what she was doing. She was amazing, and I just fell in love with her. And then while I was standing there watching her play, I was like, I'm going to make a movie about this woman, and I'm going to get her back on the Grand Ole Opry. And that's just what's going to happen. And then so I talked to her after the show, and then ended up going over to her house to meet her and her husband like a week later, and we signed a little deal. She told me that sure, you can try and make a movie about me. And then I said, okay, I'm going to. And I don't think she really actually I don't think she believed it.
Right.
And I went back to the States thinking I was going to find money for it. And then it quickly became apparent that no one was going to give me any money. And so I just kind of started piecemeal making the film. In like 2005, I went back and actually did some shooting. And a lot of that stuff made the final cut of the film. And then I was thinking that I'd find, okay, now I'll find the money.
Right.
And then no money. Went back again in 2006 to do some more shooting. And then I was like, while I was over there, I was like, well, maybe if I just maybe I should go ahead and reach out to the Grand Ole Opry and like get them interested, because surely and clearly they'll be interested in this living piece of history. Like they'll have her back on, and then maybe I'll have this woman who's going to get back on the Grand Ole Opry, and then maybe we can find some money. So I totally contacted the Grand Ole Opry. I found out who it was that I needed to contact, and they were completely uninterested, like unequivocally. We could give two flying fucks about this woman. No. And that really was very disheartening for me, because at that point, I had already been kind of at it for a couple of years. And when they said no, I was like, what do you mean? What do you mean no? I couldn't understand. And I wrote back. I was like, are you sure that you understand? Like, I literally wrote an email back like, wait a minute, let me explain to you who this woman is one more. And it was like, no, yeah, we know who she is. We're just not, no. And so then it kind of took a turn, and it was like, well, wait a minute. Like now okay. So now you have basically made yourselves the enemy. Like, I don't mean that in like I am not Michael Moore. I'm not I did not set out to make a movie to make anyone the enemy. I set out to make a movie about this amazing woman who gets to relive like her most precious memory in history, in her history.
Yep.
And they kind of just shot themselves in the foot. And I think that they thought that I was just going to go away. But what they didn't understand was no, I'm going to make this movie, like regardless of whether or not, and I'm not going to stop trying to get her on the Grand Ole Opry. Like I am, I'm like a booger that you're not going to be able to shake off your finger. You know what I mean? And so, finally, years and years had gone by, and I would go, we still got to shoot this part of the movie. So we would sublet our apartment in Brooklyn, and we would go to Japan, and we would do that part of the shooting. And then, okay, but I got to get you to Nashville again. And, so all of this, we would do all these things, and all of this incredible kind of synergy would happen. Every single time we would shoot, another part of the puzzle would be complete, and it would always be amazing because the woman was amazing. And then it finally came down to it. It was like it became clear they are literally not going to. It's just not going to happen. She's not going to ever get back on the Grand Ole Opry. And so in 2007, like 8, I had shot this sequence with her at the Ryman Auditorium where it was just her empty on the stage. And she gets to sing the song. You know, her song was the Tennessee Waltz. We had her go out there and sing the song. I literally had the stage for 30 minutes, like at 7 a.m. on a Sunday. I had to pay the Rymans $250 to let us come in there and shoot it. We shot that, and then that became the ending of the film originally. Originally, the ending was she doesn't get back on, and it was this sad song, and it was that was the version of the movie that played at South by Southwest, and it was super powerful. And I was just kind of like, yeah, all right, she did. We didn't get her back on the Grand Ole Opry, but I told the woman's story, and we premiered at South by Southwest, and you know, Morgan Spurlock came on board as our executive producer, and Elijah Wood came on board, and he narrated the movie, and then lo and behold, we're at South by Southwest, and she gets invited on Jimmy Kimmel because Kimmel was broadcasting from South by. And who do we meet backstage? Brad Paisley. And Brad Paisley goes, he came over because he saw her during soundcheck because she played with the band, with Jimmy Kimmel's band. Like Kimmel asked her to sit in the whole show. So she sat in the whole show and played with the band that whole episode. After soundcheck, Brad Paisley came over to us and introduced himself and wanted to talk to Tommy. And he goes, well, you should try and get her on the Grand Ole Opry. And I was like, really, Brad Paisley? Interesting that you say this. And then I kind of filled him in on what we'd been dealing with. And, and he goes, well, I can get her on the Grand Ole Opry. And he was like, when's the next time you're in Nashville? And we were like, well, Made in Japan does play at the Nashville International Film Festival in a month. We'll be there then. And he goes, all right, well, you know, he put us in touch with his manager, Darlene, who was very nice. And we were in Nashville a month later, and we got a phone call. I mean, we let them know that we were there, and they were like, well, if she can stay another week, I can get her on Tuesday night. And I was like, son of a bitch, Jesus, are you serious? And wow. So we had to kind of, out of nowhere, we had to go back into, like, now we're in production mode again. So we figured it out. You know, my producers, everyone was already in town because we were here for the film festival. So we just got cameras and we got her back on the Opry, man. And we shot that thing, and that's the ending now. I don't mean to give away the ending to anyone who hasn't seen it, but it is worth, I mean, it's such a crazy story that I always end up telling it anyway, you know?
Well, I thank you for it. That is an amazing story. It is a story of perseverance and what can happen if you keep your eye on the prize, and also of creativity. I mean, you found a way to make a film that was gripping and touching and took you a different place so that you could get the ending you wanted. I am fascinated about that, and so thank you for sharing it. I do want to go back because I am confused on one point in the story. Sure. Did it premiere at South by, and then from there it intrigued Morgan Spurlock and Elijah Wood, or did that happen first? And if so, how did they get involved?
First. They got it. Elijah is an old friend of mine who I'd known since 2003, 2004.
Got it.
Just we had mutual friends, and he's just someone that was in my life every now and again. Like, Elijah's in town. We're all going to go for dinner with Elijah. You know, he was just someone that I knew. And then he saw a very early cut of some of the stuff that I had shot in Japan in 2005 and just fell in love with Tommy. And and I know his brother and his sister as well. And the Woods were just very supportive in a friend way, just you know, very supportive in what I was doing, and they really, and you know, when Elijah was, you could tell he was really engaged and really loved her, and so, you know, back when I was still looking for money, I thought that if I got Elijah, maybe I'll ask him and maybe he would narrate it and then I would find the money to do it. I asked Elijah, he said yes. Didn't find any money. However, he did, and I asked him in 2007, and he stayed true to his word. Like he even I don't think we finished the movie until like 2014. I think I got Elijah's VO, his narration. I think I might have gotten that literally in 2015. Oh, wow. He stayed true to his word. Like 8 years later, he still came and he did it for me. And we gave him an executive producer credit. And Morgan saw the movie because my editor, Julie Lombardi, I had two editors on that movie, but Julie and Vicky. But Julie had been, she edited Super Size Me, Morgan's first movie.
Right.
And showed Morgan the film. She was like, I got to show this to Morgan, because it was, no one knew. I mean, I knew the whole time that it was, of course I did. I was the one making the film. It was my vision. I was like, this movie is going to be the best goddamn documentary ever made. Like I was invested in it like that. None of the people that I was working with ever were, because they simply couldn't be. It wasn't their vision. I wasn't paying anyone until I finally could. There was a point where we did find a little bit of money to be able to post it, to finally get it through post. When the film it quickly became apparent like that it was actually going to be a very good film, and Julie was like, when the time is right, I'm going to show this to Morgan, and she showed him an early cut, and he was thrilled, liked it very much, and we asked him if he wanted to come on board. We had at that point we had just submitted it to South by for the second time, because the first time when we submitted to South by in 2014 we got turned down. Then we went back to the drawing board and edited it again, like for another year. We did major changes, and Morgan was very key in getting us into South by.
Got it.
Through him, we were able to finally make the connections and be able to get seen. And it is an unfortunate part of the film business, which I don't think of the independent film business, which I don't think a lot of people truly put enough thought into, is that your relationships are incredibly important. It doesn't mean that you, yes, there's a great amount of luck involved. However, if you play your cards right and you remain authentic and you are smart, you can find those connections to people that will be able to get you in the door somewhere. But I think it really depends on for me, it was key to stay authentic, to stay, to keep my integrity, to not try and step on other people while I was doing that, and to remain true to the material, because I knew that if I did that the material would be good enough. And I believe that to this day. I think that any young, aspiring person, if you just stick with what you feel as opposed to what you think is going to make you the most money, the what you feel thing, that's what people respond to. The what you think is going to make you the money thing, probably not so much.
Yeah, I can't agree more, because one of the things that happens to me a lot is I'll be asked to make a connection, but asked to make a connection on work that I don't believe in. And I'm not sure that the person making the request of me understands how big of a deal that is.
Right.
It's a deal breaker. It could ruin the relationship I have with the person they want to get in the door with.
Totally.
If I bring them shit content.
Absolutely. And I don't think that I fully, I think another thing that a lot of people early on in their careers don't understand is like, yeah, you got that independent project that you're putting all your blood, sweat, and tears into, and it's going great, and you got this product, and wow, it's amazing. And then now oh, holy shit, you get into a festival, and then now what? Mm-hmm. People don't know that side of the business. Once you get in there, that's when the business starts. That's when the business starts. It's not you making the movie. It's not you learning how to make a good movie. No one tells you what you've got to be able to do once that movie is done. And it was such a steep learning curve for me and for all of the filmmakers my fellow producers who worked so tirelessly on that movie with me. No one had been through that process yet, you know? Mm-hmm. And that's a whole thing, man. Once you get into that side of the business, it's like the teaching is over. Now it's sink or swim. Now it's like, now you got to learn how to do business, and you're a real thing. And now it's like, are you a commodity or not? Can your movie sell? Can your movie, you know what I mean? Like are you going to be able to do this for a living? That's what it, and the doing it for a living part, that's literally like, you might as well, now you're a professional. And, right. and being a professional at anything is being a professional. So yes, making movies is hard. Yes, making a good movie is hard. But in the business itself, it's just like a given. Of course you made a good movie. Otherwise you wouldn't be sitting in this goddamn chair with me right now talking about, who can we sell it to? So now you're expected to be a professional. And that part right there is where I think a lot of people choke, because they literally don't have the experience, or they're flying high on the fumes from being treated, like a king at festivals, or they don't have the right people around them, or maybe they have drug and alcohol problems, because you see a lot of that in our business as well.
Yep. It's part of the reason we made this podcast was to educate independent filmmakers on what they need to do in starting at pre-pro, which is please have a marketing and branding budget, and then to talk about how you have to work after post or after festival to sell your film.
Yeah.
And there's a thought out there that you're going to play a game that you weren't invited to. So you're going to go play the Hollywood game and someone's going to sell the movie for you. No, you got to go out there and evangelize your film. You need to have the energy and the juice for it. Oftentimes, the filmmakers don't, because it took everything to make the movie. And so, are they going to get a chance to get a breather and rejuvenate that energy to go out and make a sales effort?
Yeah. I mean, we got lucky in that, with Made in Japan, getting that movie sold and distributed was a whole debacle. But we did have a little bit of a budget for that. And I got a lot of really good press at the time. Mm-hmm. Like I had a very good PR person at South by Southwest who got us a lot of good coverage, and that all this came through Morgan. I also went to all the festivals. Like I spent a lot of my own money to well, first of all, to make the film, but to also keep the buzz going. You know what I mean? Like, and yeah, a lot of festivals will fly you out and they'll put you up, but you're still like, you're spending a lot of money just to be there. You know what I mean? And you're not working on other things. And I got lucky in that while Made in Japan was on the festival circuit, I got hired to make my second film, and that was a whole other ballgame.
Are you talking about the Dwarvenaut?
Yes.
Because that film has a cult following.
Yeah.
It is such a fun film about such an interesting gentleman, Stephen Pokorny.
Stefan.
I'm sorry. I actually have it spelled right in front of me, and I said it wrong anyway. My apologies. Yes, Stefan Pokorny, and which is I've never heard that last name in my life. I'm almost not sure if it's real.
It's Czech. His stepfather, his adopted father was from the Czech Republic.
Got it. Well, he is a type of genius, I would say.
Yeah.
And you have this quote. You said, "I'd never met anyone quite like Stefan Pokorny. And from the moment we met, I knew we were about to embark on something nutty.
Yes.
So how did you meet Stefan, and where did you meet him?
Well, okay. So at the time, my editor, so I had two editors on Made in Japan, Julie Lombardi and Victoria Lachou. And Vicky, an editor friend of Vicky's, was a huge Dungeons and Dragons fanatic, and had been hipped to Stefan and Dwarven Forge just by Stefan's kind of online presence. But the videos that Stefan were making were horrible. Like the stuff that they were putting out there was like literally stuff shot with their, iPhone 3, like no filmmaking behind it. And he'd done his two Kickstarter campaigns very successfully. That's the whole thing about him is that his company, Dwarven Forge, they so for people who don't know anything, I mean, we're kind of getting into a different territory here. Stefan Pokorny has a company called Dwarven Forge. What Dwarven Forge does is they make Dungeons and Dragons gaming terrain, or gaming terrain for any kind of role-playing, like tabletop role-playing game. Mm-hmm. They make it in resin or in PVC, but they are the leader. They make the Ferrari of that thing, and they're Kickstarter funded. Stefan started the company back in the 90s, but he was almost bankrupt. And then in 2011, as kind of a Hail Mary pass, he did a Kickstarter, and the geek world united, and he raised like crazy money and enough to keep him in business. And then the second year that they did it, they raised like literally over $2 million.
Wow. So
he and this isn't $2 million that goes into his pocket. This is $2 million. Basically, if you pledge during one of their Kickstarter events, you're basically buying, you're pre-ordering, because what the money comes in, and then they have everything mass produced in China, and then you get your thing. So it usually takes about 6 months before you get your whatever it is that you ordered.
Right.
Forbes magazine has named Dwarven Forge as like one of the most successful Kickstarted companies of all times. So I met Stefan because that guy, Vicky introduced me to Nate, who was a fan, and Nate is also a filmmaker. However, just at that time, they were talking about doing a pilot for like a reality show or something like that, and they were willing to pony up some cash for that. And would Nate be interested? And the fact of the matter was, Nate was just too busy. So Vicky told Nate, like, look, I know this other guy who just finished this feature, and we hadn't even been accepted into the South by yet, but. He just finished this feature, and he's, you might want to talk to him. So I met with Nate, and then he kind of hipped me to what kind of a person that Stefan was, and I was like, man, that sounds like my kind of guy. So I got a camera, my camera guy, Mike Gomes, who ended up shooting the whole thing, and we went over there and we met Stefan, and it just became apparent that, like, yeah, this is going to happen. And at first I got hired to make a pilot for a reality show about Dwarven Forge. And I was like, I could make a feature out of this. And then we got into South by, and then I was like, see, I make features. and it was like, why don't we do this instead of that? And so it turned into a feature, and I followed him through his third Kickstarter campaign. I followed that company through their third Kickstarter campaign, and I told his story from beginning to end, which was just a fascinating story. Like, the guy himself is such a fascinating guy. And we got this crazy, like, surreal documentary, which I was also given the opportunity to. I made all the music for it, which was great for me, because as a filmmaker, I've always played music, but I never never aspired to be a professional musician. I just play guitar in my house. You know what I mean? Like, but I always make my own music. And I was able to score that movie. And I was really, when we had a budget, and it was the first time that I was really able to kind of flex as an artist and be able to be like, wow, man, we've got the money to do the things that we need to do, and miraculously that thing got it. We went from pre-production November 2014 to South by Southwest 2016 world premiere. I made that whole movie and got it into South by Southwest in a year.
Wow.
While on the festival circuit for Made in Japan. So I would fly off to some festival, come home, shoot 2 or 3 days, get on another plane, go somewhere else. And miraculously, I figured out that just, when I look at it now, I was like, I don't know how that happens, because I was just a kid who wanted to make movies really bad, and I made it happen, and it did, and it does. Like I've got stuff going on now. I mean, I'm not crazy. I'm not swept up in a film festival, whirlwind right now. But I have, because of those things, I have been able to keep doing what I do, and figure out how to, still slowly but surely plod along as a director,
Yeah, absolutely. What a couple of years of your life. You'll be telling that story to your grandkids someday, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Do you know what Stefan's doing now?
Yeah, Stefan and I are. Part two to that, to the Dwarvenaut, is Stefan and I became such good friends, and while we were in Italy, a large portion of the film was shot in Italy, because he was adopted by Italians. But his father was Czech, and his mother was Italian. They adopted him in the United States, but they were ethnic. His father, Jan Pokorny, was from the Czech Republic, and his mother was from Italy. So he spent a lot of his youth growing up in going to Europe in the summers. So a large part of the film was shot in Italy, and a lot of that footage didn't make it into the film. And so while I was cutting together some of the DVD extras, I made this little 10-minute documentary, and it's literally Stefan in Italy. We just kind of followed him around in Venice, and then we followed him around in Rome. And it was the most hilarious thing that I'd ever done, because it's like Anthony Bourdain on acid. like this crazy Fruit Loop, and a lovable Fruit Loop. I say that with much love and affection. He's literally one of my favorite people on the planet, Stefan. And him and I both kind of at the same time, we were like, man, we could make a TV show out of this. And we kind of both just like looked at each other. And I was like, yeah, that I think that would sell, like a documentary travel series based on the origins of fantasy. Mm-hmm. And that's, I'm not a fantasy guy. Like I've never been a Star Wars dude. I've never been a Harry Potter guy. I've never been that guy, but I'm a Stefan Pokorny guy. Right. and I came, our sensibilities are so similar that we just decided, all right, well, let's try and see if we can't make that happen. And so in 2019, after I'd already moved down here to Nashville, and we developed a pilot and went and shot and produced. 2019 was spent producing a pilot for that show. It's called Destination Fantastic. We went to Iceland. We did a whole thing on the Vikings and on like the origin of the fantasy genre with Viking mythology and volcanoes and glaciers, and we touched on the gaming culture in Iceland, and it's like that's the root of the show is to travel the world in search of fantasy. Yeah. We are in business with Legion M, who are a production company out in Los Angeles, and they do a lot of really cool things. They worked on Mandy, the movie Mandy that came out a couple of years ago. They worked on Tolkien. They worked on, I think it's called Colossus, that movie that, what's his name? Nacho Vigalondo.
Yeah.
He's just quirky film director. Anyway, cool people, and we are in business with them. And COVID slowed us way down because we were hoping to actually already kind of be making the film or making the show.
The show, yeah.
But we're slowly but surely the wheels are turning, and hopefully that show gets picked up, and we'll be doing that. And,
I think it will, because Stefan kind of jumps out at you on the screen a little bit, and
a lot of bit.
Yeah. And so I would tell anyone listening that hasn't seen your film, The Dwarvenaut, go seek it out on Amazon Prime right now, and it is well worth the $2.99 that it will cost you to rent it. So please spend the $3 on this film and not on, let's say, a coffee, and sit back and enjoy.
Yes,
and
for the price of a coffee, you can behold a film about one of the most unique individuals that the universe has ever gifted our planet.
Right. If there was the theory that half alien, half human people walk the earth is supported in this man's body and behavior. I think it's great.
And in the meantime, he's literally like one of my best friends. I tell my wife this all the time. I was like,
seems like a cool dude.
I don't know how this happened, but I feel so blessed that I have that guy in my life, because every single time I talk to him, the biggest grin, like from ear to ear, every minute of being in that guy's presence, it's like you're smiling your ass off, giggling, laughing. And I can only say that, like, some of my most joyous moments on this planet were making that movie with that guy in an airplane flying to God knows where we were going. But like true, those moments, that stuff will probably never happen ever again. You know what I mean? Like those were once in a lifetime moments. And to be able to, the thought of being able to make a TV show with the guy where that's literally, traveling the globe. I know, right. I just contradicted myself. I said that will literally never happen again. Hopefully the moments of me traveling with him will happen again. But the childlike wonder, the wonderment, the amazement, like in the meantime, he's a good friend of mine. I know him. Then it was just like, holy shit, this exists. Like this guy is real. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I can't wait to see Destination Fantastic. That sounds right up my alley, and I know it's going to happen because it's just.
Thank you for your optimism. We need it, and there are good things happening, and I believe in it fully. And I think you will be hearing more about that soon.
I cannot wait. You've been so generous with your time. I just have a few more questions. Are we good?
Yeah, man. Yeah.
Awesome. What are the two best pieces of advice you've been given in your career, and who did they come from?
Okay. Like just straight up career advice was when I was 22 and I had only been in New York for maybe 6 months or maybe a year, I got a very unique opportunity to work on Coffee and Cigarettes, a Jim Jarmusch movie, as a PA. Was on it for 2 days. And I had the opportunity to have a conversation. With Jim Jarmusch about filmmaking. I shouldn't have been doing that. I was breaking all of the rules of set hierarchy. I pissed off a lot of people, but at that point in my life, I was like, "That's Jim Jarmusch. I'm going to go and talk to him." And it was at a down moment, and Jim's a very nice guy. So he was very generous and willing to talk to me about it. And I asked him, I said, I've got this stuff inside of me that I want to do. I want to make these movies, and I don't know how to. I don't know how to find the money. And like, how Jim? What do I do? And he said, don't have an answer for you, but I can tell you that if you follow your heart and not the money, that you will figure it out. So, and I took that very seriously. And now, granted, like, Jim Jarmusch has had that kid come up to him a million times in his career, right? And he's probably given that answer a million times. But that has proven to be true in my career. I followed that piece of advice from him. Now, granted, I was already on that path. I was already dead set on making my movies, but I don't think, if he hadn't told me that, then I probably would not have just said, fuck it, I'm going to make this documentary, whether or not I have the money to do it or not. I mean, basically what he was saying is don't whine, don't complain, just make the movie. I mean, I think he literally told me that. I remember him saying, just make the movie. Just make it. Stop worrying about whether or not it's going to get into festivals, whether or not you're going to be famous because of it, whether or not you're going to find money to make the thing. Just pick up the fucking camera and make the goddamn movie. And I can't tell you how many people that I knew as I progressed in my because I have worked in the film business, like in the business for a long time before I ever did anything as a director or made a name for myself as any kind of a name for myself as a director. I PA'd forever, and then I became an art director on music videos. Like, I used to production design music videos. I'm a professional editor, but anyone that I knew coming up would always talk about when I make my movie. But no one was making a movie, or there were those who were making movies. And those are people. Any of the people that I know or knew back then who made it were literally people like me who were saying, "I don't need the goddamn money," or maybe I do need some money, but I'm going to find it in an unconventional way, or I'm going to come hell or high water. I'm going to get it done, and that's what I did. And that's how, after 11 years, I had a film that got into South by Southwest. What I would say to any young upcoming director is exactly what Jim Jarmusch told me is just make the fucking movie. Just make it. And don't there's two kinds of filmmakers. There's artists and there's people who got in it to make money. And unfortunately for people like us, there are people in this business who are in it to make money, and they are successful. And a lot of those people got to where they are by stepping on other people, by shit talking other people, by doing bad, like by becoming assholes, professional ones. And in real life, unfortunately, the bad guy oftentimes wins. In real life, there is no comeuppance. In real life, the bad guy, a lot of times, he becomes a millionaire. And not only that, and then he makes other people's lives miserable by him being a millionaire. So if you want to know from me, and I know you're not asking me this, but if a budding filmmaker wants to know from me, how do I get into this business and make a bunch of money? Then I tell them, you're in the wrong business. Go do something else. Go become a fucking stockbroker. If you're in the business because you just can't do anything else, and you literally, like, you could not fathom your life beyond this, and you're willing to live like you're in college until you're 45, then sure, then come do this and do it with a smile on your face, because it's one of the hardest things that you could possibly do, but know that you're doing what you love. And that in itself is for me, was imperative. It's like, I don't have another thing that I can do. And not only that, I financially locked myself into a project that I either get this thing done or I'm not going to have a career,
Yeah. And it's a privilege. It's a privilege to make a movie and to have the skill set to do it and to be able to live a life fulfilled through your work and your art and the messages that you want to put out in the world, versus making a bunch of money that you can always make. People always will say, well, time is money. And I hate that, because time is not money. Time is so much more valuable.
Yeah.
Every time I've lost money, I've made money back. But I've never been able to make the time back, not even once. So Maybe Elon Musk can figure that out for us all. We get the time back.
He's got some shit figured out that we definitely don't.
That's for sure.
That's my one. That's one piece of advice, and then I guess the other piece of advice was kind of what we touched on earlier on, and it's something that I didn't learn until later. Is that the business really doesn't begin until after the film is made. So as far as I think we touched on it a little bit. You said that you guys kind of try and school people on this earlier. Is like eventually, like, yes, hone in on the craft and hone in on your style and hone in on all of that. Get all of that on lock. But eventually that is going to just become par for the course. And then it's business. So I would almost say, like, yes, have fun, watch out for drugs and alcohol, and try and Scorsese said it once best. He's like, it's the film is the perfect marriage between business and art. And oftentimes it's an unhappy marriage because those two sides of your brain, they just aren't made to work like that. You know what I mean? So just keep in mind that it's a business, but that doesn't mean that you can't make it your own business, especially now in this day and age, you know?
That's exactly right.
We don't need 35 millimeter cameras anymore. Movies are being made on iPhones. You can get out there and practice that craft and get good, you know, at a younger now than you used to be able to. When I'm kind of like the last generation of filmmakers that I was making films before the DSLR revolution. So if you were making, HD movies, you still needed a pretty decent camera, and you still needed shit. If you were going to put lenses on a camera, you needed an insurance policy. You needed things. You needed some money. Nowadays, you don't need fucking anything to hone in on your craft. You know what I mean?
An iPhone 12 Pro and Filmic Pro for $15 from the App Store, and maybe a screw-on lens that you can get from Amazon, and you're good to go. The soft lights are really cheap now. Like, you can get a pair of soft lights for $100 or so.
$100, yeah.
You can do it if you want to do it. There's a filmmaker in town named Katie Amon who I admire a lot, and she shoots full feature films on iPhone 8s and has an entire process around how to buy up the phones and what to do with them afterwards and all that stuff. So yeah, I would definitely recommend anyone listening to check out Katie. She just released a feature film called Faye, which is the first feature film starring one woman from beginning to end, just one person in the movie from beginning to end. Yeah, horror movie. One woman in a cabin. Not that this is like sponsored by Faye and Katie Amon, but yeah, there's one woman in a cabin losing her mind slowly. So yeah, check that out. It was shot on an iPhone, I believe. You're a passionate guy, Josh. This has been a blast. I'm curious, how do you see yourself giving back through the work you do? What is the impact or message you want to leave behind?
I'm not really a message guy. I kind of try and stay away from messages because I consider myself a highly flawed individual, and I've had a pretty crazy life, pretty dramatic and traumatic youth, and it's been very difficult to do what I do. And to kind of get through childhood to where I am now it's been a journey for sure. But I consider myself very flawed, so I don't like to try and point fingers and say you should think this in my work, because I think that if you look at, I'm just maybe I'm not that confident, maybe I'm not confident enough to tell the world you need to think this. But what I kind of, 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 I kind of what I do is I stick true to my style. I don't take projects that I don't believe in. I only take projects that I know that I can make excellent on my barometer. And I feel like, I guess I kind of just try and set an example for other people who want to learn how to do this. I just try and be as honest as I possibly can. And last year, when the tornado came through, I was given an opportunity to go shoot for 4 days with a very small crew for no money. It was a little bit of money, but not, when I say no money, I mean, in film terms, no money. And we're working on finishing that thing. That's a work in progress. I'm not, I don't know what's going to happen with that, but that was really just, you can make art in lieu of donating money. You can make art to reflect the time, as opposed to, art is a reflection of the time. So for me, if I'm ever going to make something with a message, it's literally just holding up a mirror and showing it, as opposed to saying like, you need to think this or that. It's like what I do with my films is I hold up a mirror, I show that, and I say like, what do you see? Does that make sense?
I love it. I love it.
I hope that makes sense. And I honestly mean that. I'm not trying to sound like it's not some hipster bullshit. You know what I mean?
Well, we get a lot of that in Nashville, these days. But I don't think you're one at all. This has been just a wonderful conversation, and so many points to touch on. I have so much research on you. I probably could talk to you for another 2 hours, but we'll save it for round 2. Josh, tell everybody where they can find you on the internet, on social media, and maybe even see some of your work.
Okay. Well, so you can find me on just at inatunnel.com. You can find us on Instagram and on Facebook. Just look up, let's see, what is my Instagram handle? I think it's at inatunnel. And same for Facebook. You can find us on Facebook. You can see Made in Japan. It is no longer streaming as of like Amazon just dumped a bunch of titles, but you can still rent it. It's on Amazon and it's on Tubi. You can see Made in Japan, and you can also see the Dwarvenaut on all of the online portals, Amazon, iTunes, like all of the stuff, like all of the SVOD things. Like all you got to do is Google it. You can find both of those movies. And then I would say, stay in tune, because you're going to start hearing stuff about Destination Fantastic, and that hopefully from this podcast to God's ears is going to come into fruition.
I believe it.
That's going to be a show unlike anything you've ever seen before.
I absolutely cannot wait for it. And we'll end on this. What are the advantages of having your life partner as a business partner, and what are some of the drawbacks as well?
My wife's a photographer. She's a documentary photographer, and she's a photo retoucher. And she'd never shot video before. And then during this pandemic, we just kind of did some experiments, and they went really well. And I was like, I can use your skill. Well, let's pull our skill sets together. So now we're a husband and wife filmmaker team. She's shot multiple projects for me. And just by me kind of under my direction, she's becoming like I don't mean like I'm teaching her to be a DP. I just mean like if I direct her what I want, then she can she's been able to figure it out. And we're becoming like a really cool filmmaking team. And that's something that I never thought I'd have at my disposal. So that's been great. Like my partner, my wife is my life partner, and I've been blessed to have someone that our aesthetic is very similar. So it just kind of works like that. So creatively, we've been able to feed off of each other's skills, because she's a photographer and a retoucher. I'm a director and a professional editor. So we've been able to pull our skills together, and we've become a rock and roll team. You know what I mean?
I love it.
So that's it's just been incredibly advantageous. Any kind of I mean, like, she's my wife, so oftentimes on a set, if we're shooting together, then that's not your we could snap. It doesn't happen often, but sure, you can snap it. You can snap at one another, or and amends might need to be made after the shoot's over. And we have a 5-year-old, so that causes some issues. We always have to find, if we're working together, then we always have to find a place to put our child.
Right.
Yep.
I love it.
Business wise, she's way more savvy than me, so I kind of leave any of the accounting and all that stuff. She's mostly in charge of, and then the phone calls and the schmoozing and all that stuff. I do that. I take that part of the business.
Sounds like way more upside than down, Josh. And just like this podcast, just like this conversation, way more upside than down for sure. I had a great time. You're a brilliant storyteller, and I wish you nothing but luck going forward. I know you don't need it, but I'll wish it anyway.
I need it. Trust me.
And I hope we get to see each other face to face soon, and definitely do a round 2.
Yeah, man, I'd be honored. Thanks for having me.
Anytime. Take care.
Take care.
Peace. You've been listening to the Make It Podcast. To find more information about this week's topics, including links to relevant blog posts, projects, and indie creatives, please visit our website at www.bonsai.film. If you haven't already, you can join our podcast community on Apple Podcast or the podcast app of your choice by searching for Make It Bonsai Creative, and the show will pop right up. You now have the opportunity to support the production of this podcast. If you love Make It and are a true fan of what we're trying to accomplish in the indie film community, please visit www.bonsai.film and click Contribute. Contributions start at only $5 monthly. You can follow us on Instagram and Twitter at _Bonsai Creative, and Facebook by searching for Bonsai Creative. You can follow Nick on Twitter at Nicholas Bugs, and you can follow me, Chris, on Twitter at Flame in Your Heart. That's FLAMEINURHEART. And of course, if you're looking to take a big step towards your filmmaking success, go to www.bonsai.film and click on Services to explore a variety of offerings, from keynotes and panels to pitch readiness assessments and advisory production. You have everything to gain. Until next time, be better, be creative, be engaged, and thank you for listening.